it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to be creating some border stamps out of regular stamps that you have in your stash. Now these are 3 here on my desk which would work really well. But with a little bit of stamping and masking, you could also use these ones here. So the one on the right is the Mini Floral Wonder, and then this one here is the Daisies stamp. So these ones would work well if you stamped them out and masked over top to kind of add them in together a little bit more. Or you could just use like the big flower here. This is the Lily Sketch stamp from this one. Or these are the ones that you could use today. So this is the Scented Blooms stamp, and you would just go right underneath those 3 flowers. You could do a really similar thing here on this one, which is the Floral Wonder, or this is the one that I'm going to use today, and this one is the Garden Spray. So if you have a look in your stash, I am sure that there is something that you can turn into a border stamp, even though that may not have been their kind of original intended purpose. So I am going to use a stamp platform because I don't even have an acrylic block big enough for this stamp here. So I am just going to kind of pop it on this piece of, this is a piece of watercolor paper. This is the Tim Holtz watercolor paper, and this is my favorite watercolor paper by a long way. This is pretty much the only watercolor paper I use. Then I'm using an anti-static powder bag because I'm going to emboss this. That just makes watercoloring that much easier for me. I'm using some VersaFine Onyx black ink, which is this gorgeous dark beautiful pigment ink that I'm going to use, and this will also stay wet long enough to attach the embossing powder to it. I'm going to double stamp it just so I get a really nice dark crisp image. Then I am going to turn this stamp around and pop it down the bottom. So I'm kind of using the other edge of the stamp. So it kind of looks like you may have almost used 2 different stamps to create this, and yet they have the same kind of look to them, when in reality we just used 1 stamp and changed it up a little bit. Now it doesn't really matter how high or how low we put these on our piece of paper because we will be kind of cutting these out and changing them around. But once I've stamped out both of these edges, I am going to add the clear embossing powder. I always say to go for the super fine embossing powder because that way you don't have to buy the regular and the super fine. The super fine will do the really detailed images, but it will also do bold images just the same. Then I will heat set these, of course, to melt the embossing powder. Make sure that it turns nice and glossy, although you can get some matte embossing powders too if that's more your thing. Then for today, I know that you can use a whole lot of different mediums and use whatever makes you comfortable, but I'm going to be using Piggyback, Minty Fresh, Overzealous, and then Over the Moon for these ones today. Now these are Simon Hurley's dye inks. They are water reactive and I love this Minty Fresh. In fact, this might be my favorite color. This and the tropical one I have are my favorites from his line altogether. Now this is how I have my little swatches here. I just have them on a little piece of string which hangs on a tiny hook on my desk, and they're nice and small. These are obviously just mini tags, and I just stamped the same stamp over and over again, and then I use my label maker to write out the names there. And this is how the Minty Fresh one kind of stamps out. It looks a little bit lighter on the lid, but that's how I have these, just so that I can remember what they kind of truly stamp out to be. And of course they're going to look a little bit different when you are watercoloring and things like that with them, with different strengths of the inks. Now just because I have the re-inkers, I'm going to put out a couple of dots of each color, and you can definitely just squish your ink pads down onto an acrylic block. That works perfectly fine too, but for this technique I'm going to kind of just add basically a really flat layer of color, so nothing special to it. So I used the pink one, the Piggyback color to begin with, then the Over the Moon color, which is the yellow, and then for the third one I wanted something similar but I didn't have the right color, so I just added both of those inks together and it came out with this gorgeous orange color. Adding a little bit more yellow to make it really nice and orange, and then I kind of added a little too much ink there, so I'm just going to rub it off on the paper towel beside me and then get rid of some of that color just so it's a little bit lighter and we're able to add a little bit of detail later on. Then that top little flower is going to be pink, and the leaves here, I'm going to do the leaves are going to be the Overzealous color, which is just a light green color. Again, pretty much just coming in with flat green color. And then the Minty Fresh is going to be these other little fauna pieces here, whatever kind of fauna they are. Then I'm also going to add a tiny little bit of that minty fresh on the green leaves as well. So I'm going to do the same down the bottom. That nice pink one is going to be a base layer here. And I mean, as I said, use whatever mediums work best for you. If you like colored pencils, then go ahead. If you like alcohol markers, go ahead. If you like literally whatever works well for you is what you should color with, because that's what you're most comfortable with and you're going to enjoy that the most. So this is probably, I kind of find this watercoloring technique the easiest for me. I am definitely no artist, but I'm going to add in a few little darker pieces here, and the stamp kind of gives away a little bit where you can put in some of these darker pieces as well, but I'm just using the same colored ink but just a more saturated version of it. So I'm just going over a little bit of the edges, and then when it comes to this orangey one that I created myself, again just a more saturated version of the same ink, so it makes it nice and easy. Now, even when it comes to things like the minty fresh colour there, adding just a little bit of ink down the bottom of the leaves there will make all the difference and make them not quite so flat, even though there's really no skill to doing that. So once this is all nice and dry and I have left this for an hour or two and came back to it, I am going to be popping this on a grey background here. Now, in all honesty, I just saw this grey piece on my desk from a different project and decided that this would work really well, but you could definitely play around with other colours. I quite like the kind of neutral grey that this one is, and I'm going to cut this down to be 3 3/4 inches by 5. So that is going to leave a 1/4 inch border around the outside here of my card base. So I have cut it all down, and then once I have done that, I am going to work out where I want to, or kind of what I need to cut off the floral image, or what I want to be included. So this is a little bit of a shame, and I do love the full image here, but I want that cut down look, so I am going to cut it. And this is the part where I can kind of be nice and selective. But after I made this first cut, I decided that I wanted to kind of get different pieces for the top and the bottom. So just when I'm thinking about this in my head, I'm going to cut this in half, and that means that I am able to kind of get the exact bits that I want, even if the top and the bottom are slightly different or off center from each other. So I'm just cutting it down, so these are going to have a really tiny little grey border around them. Obviously you can end up having the smaller or as bigger borders as you prefer, but then I'm going to get a really good pair of fussy cutting scissors, and I keep coming back to these little cutter bee scissors. These are my favorites. I have been tempted to try some of the spring form scissors ones from, I see Fiskars have some. So let me know in the comment section down below if you have some of those scissors and prefer them, but I really do like these ones, so I kind of don't see a need to replace them at all. I am a creature of habit and I like the things that work for me, so maybe I'll stick with these ones. So now, just when I'm thinking about where I need to put the sentiment, I was thinking about how I would stamp it down whilst making sure it didn't cover anything else, and I thought the easiest way is to temporarily adhere these down. So I'm going to use some of this Tombow temporary adhesive. This is the removable or repositionable one. It is not meant to be permanent at all. It just has enough tack to kind of hold things in place while you are kind of sorting out where you want everything to go, and it rubs off really nice and easily with my finger. I've used this one for a long time and I am definitely sold on it, and I am just going to pop them there whilst I decide what I want in the middle. I'm going to be using this scrapbook.com one. This is the Botanical Borders with sentiments. It's got a few really good sentiments in here, but for this one I already knew that I needed the happy birthday one. I like the size of it. It fits in here really well. It actually does cross over on one of those little leaves there on the top corner. So once I think I have it in place, I'm going to shut the door to my little stamping platform, and then I'm going to remove that top one there just so that I don't end up stamping over top of it. It's just a tiny little bit, so it doesn't bother me enough to want to have to change stamps or move it, but I just didn't want to get it obviously on top of my image either. So I'm going to stamp it down nicely, and one layer did this one really well. I'm stamping it with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, the same ink that I did to outline the flowers so that everything coordinates nicely. Then I'm going to take a little bit of foam tape and pop up my little floral images here. I love the look of them just popping off the page a little bit and make them a little bit more 3D. If you've watched my last few videos, you will know that I am well and truly out of foam tape in my normal rolls. So I have been digging through and cleaning things out, and I'm just using up all the little scraps of everything that have been floating around in my drawers. These are the really skinny strips from Daisies, and I'm actually using 2 at a time here. I'm just using some foam squares, foam strips, whatever I can kind of sort and find in my little stash. And then I peel off the release paper and pop these on so that they have that tiny little border of grey showing all around. And I really like that they're not just kind of even with the grey. I think it was worth cutting them down just that tiny little bit more so it created that grey border. I have already got enough dimension with the foam tape for my liking, so I am going to pop this down flat with some liquid glue down onto my card base, which I think I mentioned at the beginning is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And then one of the questions that I get asked most often is about Nuvo drops and which colors should I get. So this is the white one here, and the 3 that I probably think you should get right from the get-go if you're going to get any at all are the black, the white, and this one here is the clear. Now they call it morning dew, but it dries completely clear and completely transparent. Now I think that these are a good 3 to start with. If you're going to add 2 more at all, it would probably be the silver and the gold. And from my experience, these are my 5 most used colors in my stash. I've also used the scrapbook.com color pops, and they are very, very similar to the Nuvo drops in my opinion. So either would work really well. I will link to everything that is still available down in the description box below in case you are interested in checking everything out. I always really appreciate the support, and thank you for all of the lovely, gorgeous comments that I get left. I'm always overwhelmed with how much support and everybody's kindness in the comments. It means so much to me, so thank you. And that is pretty much my card for today. So we were able to turn just normal stamps into something that looks a little bit more like border stamps, and I had so much fun creating it. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!